You're listening to the Bare Metal Cyber Prepcast, created to help you succeed in your Security Plus certification journey. Learn more at baremetalcyber.com, where additional prepcasts, books, and training materials await. Let's get started. Vulnerability analysis is the practice of transforming raw scanner results or research findings into an actionable risk view that organizations can actually use to drive remediation. Scanners often produce enormous volumes of output, flagging every potential issue without considering business context. Analysis takes those findings and organizes them into a hierarchy of importance, allowing teams to focus resources on the vulnerabilities that matter most. This step bridges the gap between detection and remediation. Without analysis, organizations drown in alerts, while with it, they turn noise into prioritized, actionable insights that reduce genuine exposure. It is essential to understand the difference between raw findings and validated, contextualized vulnerabilities. A raw finding might state that a system is running an outdated library with a known flaw. On its own, that statement doesn't reveal whether the vulnerability is exploitable, whether compensating controls exist, or whether the asset itself is critical. Contextualization adds this missing information, showing which findings translate into real-world risk. Hardened vulnerability programs avoid chasing every raw output. Instead, they sift findings for relevance, ensuring remediation work targets weaknesses with actual security impact. Inputs for prioritization include asset criticality, business impact, exploitability, and exposure context. A vulnerability on a non-critical internal test server carries much less urgency than the same flaw on a production database containing sensitive customer records. Business impact looks beyond technical severity to consider how exploitation would affect operations, compliance, or reputation. Exploitability determines how realistic an attack is, while exposure context examines whether the system is internet-facing or shielded behind layers of defense. By blending these factors, organizations turn technical issues into risk-informed priorities. Compensating controls shape prioritization by lowering the effective risk of unresolved vulnerabilities. For example, if a database vulnerability exists but the system is behind a firewall that blocks the relevant traffic, the urgency of patching decreases slightly. Compensating controls include intrusion prevention systems, network segmentation, or monitoring rules that mitigate risk until a true fix can be applied. Hardened analysis recognizes these controls but does not over-rely on them. They buy time, but they are rarely perfect substitutes for remediation. Prioritization reflects the balance between direct fixes and mitigating safeguards. Basic scoring approaches like the Common Vulnerability Scoring System, CVSS, provide a starting point but have limitations without context. CVSS rates vulnerabilities on a numerical scale, combining factors such as attack vector, complexity, and impact. While helpful for standardization, CVSS scores alone can be misleading. A flaw with a high CVSS score may not matter if it exists on a non-critical system with no exposure, while a medium issue on a mission-critical asset may demand urgent action. Hardened organizations use CVSS as one input among many, not as the sole decision driver. Threat intelligence enriches prioritization by highlighting which vulnerabilities are actively exploited in the wild or have proof-of-concept code available. For example, two vulnerabilities may share identical CVSS scores, but if one is currently being targeted by ransomware groups, it jumps higher on the remediation list. Threat intelligence adds real-world context to theoretical risk, allowing organizations to respond to what attackers are actually doing rather than what they might do. Hardened analysis integrates live intelligence feeds to adjust priorities dynamically as threats evolve. Time to exploit is another factor that shifts urgency. Some vulnerabilities are weaponized within days of disclosure, while others may take months or years to become practical attack vectors. The faster a vulnerability is likely to be exploited, the less time organizations have to respond. Time to exploit metrics, often drawn from threat intelligence, help security teams focus on vulnerabilities with shrinking windows. Hardened prioritization uses these insights to align patch timelines with attacker behavior, closing dangerous gaps before exploitation becomes widespread. Environmental factors significantly influence prioritization. Internet-facing systems, privileged accounts, and assets containing sensitive data all elevate the risk associated with a vulnerability. A web server exposed to the public internet requires faster remediation than an internal kiosk in a restricted environment, even if both have the same technical flaw. Similarly, vulnerabilities on accounts or systems with elevated privileges demand urgent attention, since compromise could cascade across the organization. Hardened analysis applies these environmental lenses to ensure prioritization reflects actual exposure, not abstract technical ratings. Grouping related findings into incident classes prevents remediation thrash. For instance, dozens of findings across multiple systems may stem from the same missing patch. By grouping them, remediation teams can apply a single fix broadly instead of treating each instance as unique. This consolidation not only saves time, but also reduces fatigue from repetitive work. Hardened organizations structure vulnerability analysis to emphasize patterns, enabling efficient remediation campaigns rather than piecemeal fixes. Grouping transforms overwhelming lists into manageable, systemic solutions. Stakeholder mapping clarifies who must approve remediation, accept risk, or schedule fixes. A vulnerability on an HR system may require sign-off from both IT and HR leadership, while one on cloud infrastructure may involve security and DevOps. Mapping stakeholders ensures accountability and avoids delays caused by unclear responsibilities. Hardened programs document who owns remediation and who can authorize exceptions, ensuring that decision-making flows smoothly. Without mapping, vulnerabilities often stall in limbo, waiting for unclear approvals. Documented prioritization rules provide repeatability and transparency. Without written guidelines, prioritization becomes subjective and inconsistent, varying by analyst or situation. Rules define how factors like CVSS, asset criticality, and exploitability are weighed, creating consistency across teams. They also provide transparency to executives and auditors, demonstrating that vulnerability management is a structured process rather than ad hoc judgment. Hardened organizations update these rules as environments evolve, ensuring they remain relevant and defensible. A practical prioritization starter is to capture 4 key data points for each finding: CVSS score, exposure, internet-facing yes/no, asset criticality, high/medium/low, and presence of a known exploit. Sorting findings by these combined attributes quickly highlights the most urgent risks. For example, a medium CVSS flaw on a high criticality, internet-facing system with an active exploit outranks a high CVSS flaw on a low criticality internal asset. This structured approach allows organizations to begin prioritizing effectively, even before adopting advanced tools. Hardened environments build on this baseline, refining their models over time. For more cyber-related content and books, please check out cyberauthor.me. Also, there are other prepcasts on cybersecurity and more at baremetalcyber.com. Risk scoring enhancements move beyond simple severity ratings by weighting asset value, business impact, and compensating controls. For example, a vulnerability on a revenue-generating platform may carry a higher weight than the same flaw on a less critical system. Compensating controls such as firewalls or monitoring may lower risk, but their effectiveness must be factored honestly. These enhancements create a more realistic view of exposure by acknowledging that vulnerabilities do not exist in a vacuum. Hardened programs embrace context-driven scoring that reflects both the technical severity and the organizational importance of each asset. Automated enrichment pipelines help analysts by pulling in threat intelligence, vendor advisories, exploit availability, and indicators of compromise. Instead of manually cross-referencing each finding, enrichment tools automatically attach relevant context to scanner output. For instance, if exploit code is published for a vulnerability, the enrichment pipeline will mark it as higher risk. This automation accelerates decision-making, reduces manual workload, and ensures consistency. Hardened organizations embed enrichment into vulnerability workflows, ensuring every finding is enhanced with current intelligence before prioritization decisions are made. Tactical versus strategic fixes reflect two different approaches to remediation. A tactical fix might be applying a quick patch to address an immediate vulnerability. A strategic fix, however, may involve redesigning an architecture, replacing legacy software, or implementing segmentation to reduce systemic exposure. Both are necessary. Tactical fixes address short-term risks, while strategic changes eliminate recurring issues. Hardened programs prioritize a balance, ensuring teams are not trapped in endless patching cycles without addressing root causes. Prioritization distinguishes between urgent patches and transformative improvements that reduce long-term vulnerability. Batching similar fixes reduces overhead by grouping related vulnerabilities into single change control events. For example, applying a cumulative patch across all systems at once is more efficient than addressing each instance individually. This also minimizes downtime by consolidating maintenance windows. Hardened organizations use batching to streamline remediation, accelerating closure while reducing operational disruption. By treating related findings as part of a family rather than isolated items, organizations make vulnerability management scalable and less burdensome for IT and security teams alike. Temporary mitigations provide breathing room when patches are not immediately available. Techniques like virtual patching with intrusion prevention systems, restricting access through firewall rules, or disabling vulnerable services reduce exposure until permanent fixes can be applied. These mitigations, however, must be tracked with clear life cycles to prevent them from becoming forgotten permanent states. Hardened environments emphasize that temporary measures buy time, not solve the problem. Documenting and monitoring these exceptions ensures vulnerabilities are ultimately fixed, not hidden behind stopgap protections. Executive dashboards translate vulnerability data into business-relevant insights. Instead of technical detail, these dashboards highlight residual risk, remediation velocity, and trends in open versus closed vulnerabilities. This empowers leadership to make informed decisions about resource allocation and to monitor progress at a strategic level. Hardened programs design dashboards to communicate effectively with non-technical audiences, turning vulnerability management into a shared concern across the organization rather than a siloed IT issue. Metrics presented clearly foster accountability and encourage ongoing investment in remediation efforts. Feedback loops integrate remediation outcomes back into prioritization logic. If certain vulnerabilities consistently take longer to remediate, that insight can inform future planning by adjusting prioritization or resource allocation. Similarly, if mitigations are proven effective, prioritization models can account for them. This continuous refinement ensures prioritization evolves with real-world experience. Hardened organizations build these loops into governance, ensuring vulnerability management adapts as conditions change. Lessons learned from past findings become inputs to smarter, more effective future prioritization. Exception handling acknowledges that not every vulnerability can be patched immediately. Documented acceptance processes allow owners to defer remediation under defined conditions, such as when compensating controls exist. These exceptions must be time-bound and subject to periodic review, preventing them from becoming permanent blind spots. Hardened environments insist on transparency. Exceptions are logged, approved at the right level, and revisited regularly. This ensures exceptions remain controlled risk decisions rather than silent liabilities. Communication templates streamline how prioritized vulnerabilities are assigned to owners. Tickets should include not just the raw finding but also context such as CVSS score, exploit availability, asset criticality, and remediation guidance. Clear, consistent communication reduces confusion and accelerates closure. Hardened organizations standardize these templates so remediation teams always have the information they need to act. Good communication transforms vulnerability reports from noise into actionable tasks aligned with business context. Measuring program effectiveness ensures vulnerability management delivers real value. Key metrics include mean time to remediate by severity, the percentage of critical findings closed within SLA, and reductions in residual risk over time. These indicators reveal whether prioritization decisions are working and whether teams can keep pace with threats. Hardened programs use metrics to inform leadership and refine strategy, ensuring vulnerability management is not just about activity, but about measurable outcomes that reduce risk to the enterprise. Cross-functional coordination is critical when high-impact vulnerabilities span applications, infrastructure, and networks. For example, a critical flaw in a widely used library may require fixes across multiple teams. Without coordination, remediation efforts may be fragmented and inconsistent. Hardened programs establish cross-functional workflows, ensuring remediation is unified and timely across domains. This collaborative approach reduces duplication of effort and prevents gaps where vulnerabilities remain unpatched. Prioritization ensures teams align their work with shared urgency and business risk. Ultimately, prioritization must be repeatable, transparent, and tied to business impact rather than relying solely on raw scores. Vulnerability management is not about chasing numbers but about reducing the risks that truly matter to the organization. Repeatability ensures consistency, transparency builds trust across stakeholders, and business alignment ensures resources go where they have the greatest effect. Hardened organizations treat prioritization as a disciplined process, turning vulnerability analysis into a structured practice that balances urgency with context, achieving resilience through intelligent decision-making. Thanks for tuning in to the Bare Metal Cyber Prepcast, your trusted source for cybersecurity news and insights. Remember to subscribe at baremetalcyber.com so you never miss an update. And visit cyberauthor.me for best-selling cybersecurity books that equip you with expert knowledge. Until next time, stay secure and stay vigilant.